What if the loudest thing holding you back is something no one else can hear? Not the world, not your past, not even your circumstances, but your own mind. That quiet, invisible storm that pulls you away from everything you promised yourself you'd do. You sit down to study, your phone buzzes, you plan your day, but one message derails everything. You try to focus, but your mind has already wandered somewhere else. Sound familiar? You're not alone. So many of us carry dreams, talent, even ambition, but still feel stuck. Not because we don't care, but because we don't know how to train the one thing that controls everything else, our focus. This is the story of a boy named Ethan. He wasn't born special. He wasn't some genius with superpowers. He was just like you, full of potential, and quietly overwhelmed by a mind he couldn't control. But something changed. A lesson, a test, and a simple glass of water. What happened next didn't just change his life. It might just change yours too. So let me ask you, if your dreams are the destination and your mind is the horse, who's really holding the reins? Let's begin. In a quiet village nestled between golden hills and rustling orchards, time moved slowly, and life was simple. Morning light filtered through tall trees, and the wind carried the scent of earth and wildflowers. Amid this calm landscape lived a boy named Ethan. He wasn't the loudest, nor the strongest, but he had something rare, a mind full of wonder. He could solve puzzles that baffled adults, remembered the smallest details, and often asked questions no one else thought to ask. Teachers praised him. Neighbors admired him. His parents looked at him with quiet pride. People said he was gifted, a bright spark in a peaceful place. But brilliance has shadows. And behind Ethan's alert eyes was a struggle no one else could see. While others saw confidence, Ethan quietly fought a storm. His mind was like a wild bird, curious, energetic, but never still. He would sit down to study, determined to focus, and yet, within minutes, a whisper would creep in. Check your phone. Just one video. Maybe your friends are outside. One distraction led to another. Minutes slipped into hours. Books stayed unopened. Pages turned blank in his memory. His body was in the room, but his mind wandered far away. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He simply couldn't hold his focus, no matter how badly he wanted to. It was as if something invisible was pulling him away from every goal he set. Every time he tried to concentrate, 1,000 other thoughts would rush in. And every time he failed to push them back, he blamed himself. He wondered if he was broken, if all that potential people saw in him was just a false promise. Why can't I just stay still like everyone else? He would think. Why do I feel capable of so much and still do so little? This was Ethan's invisible battle, not with the world, but within his own mind. No one could see it, yet it followed him everywhere. At school, at home, even in quiet moments when everything was calm, his thoughts would not let him rest. He began to believe that maybe this was just who he was, a boy full of potential, but destined to stay stuck, always distracted, never fulfilled. But what Ethan didn't know, not yet, was that this restless mind of his wasn't a flaw. It was a gift, a force. And like any wild force in nature, it didn't need to be silenced. It needed to be trained. And when it was, it could take him further than he ever imagined. Ethan didn't tell anyone about the war inside his mind. Not because he was hiding it, but because he didn't think anyone would understand. Every day felt like starting strong, then quietly slipping, losing minutes to distraction, hours to regret. And slowly, he began to believe that maybe this was just how he was built, that maybe being gifted meant being cursed with a mind that never stayed still. But someone did notice. Someone who had once fought his own battle in silence. His father. He had seen it in Ethan's unfocused eyes. The way he started things with fire and ended in frustration. The way he smiled less and sighed more. And one evening, as the sun melted into the hills and the first stars peeked out of the sky, he decided it was time, not to lecture, not to scold, but to guide his son towards something deeper, something Ethan didn't even know he needed yet. After weeks of watching Ethan drift further away, always distracted, always chasing something else, his father could no longer stay silent. He wasn't a loud man, but he had lived long enough to know when someone was fighting a war inside. One evening, as the golden sky faded into soft violet, he invited Ethan to sit beside him on the steps outside their home. The air was still. Crickets began their slow hum. For a long while, neither of them spoke. And then, in a voice both gentle and firm, his father said, "Your mind is like a wild horse. If you don't train it, it will throw you down. But if you learn to ride it, son, it'll take you anywhere." Ethan blinked. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to understand, but the words felt like they belonged in another world. Ride his mind, train it. How could he even begin to do something like that when he could barely stay focused for 5 minutes? A few days later, his father brought him to a quiet house at the edge of the village. Vines curled around wooden beams, and the air smelled of pine and patience. There lived Master Elijah, a man who said little, but whose presence somehow quieted everything. He didn't ask Ethan questions. He didn't give speeches. Instead, he walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and handed it to Ethan without a word. Then he said, "Walk around the garden. Don't spill a drop." That was all. No rules, no explanations. Ethan looked at the glass, confused but curious. A simple task, it seemed. Too simple to matter. But he obeyed. The gravel path wound through flowers and trees, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. As Ethan walked, birds chirped above him. Laughter echoed from children playing nearby. The wind rustled the leaves just enough to catch his attention, and without thinking, he turned his head toward every sound. At first, just a few drops spilled, then a bit more. A sudden breeze, a bee flying past, someone shouting from the far end of the garden. All of it pulled his focus, and the water trembled in his hands. By the time he returned to Master Elijah, nearly half the glass had emptied. Ethan looked down, disappointed. He hadn't even realized how much he'd spilled. Elijah didn't scold him. He simply asked, "Why did you spill it?" Ethan paused. "I got distracted," he admitted. Elijah nodded slowly. "Exactly," he said. "The water is your focus. The garden is life. The sounds, the people, the thoughts, they are everywhere, and they always will be. You cannot stop the noise of the world, but you can choose where you pour your attention. Because if you let every sound pull you, your focus will spill, and so will your dreams." Ethan stood in silence, holding the half-empty glass, and for the first time, something clicked. The metaphor wasn't just clever, it was real. The distractions had names: his phone, his fear of missing out, his impatience, and none of them were going to stop on their own. But maybe he could stop reacting to them. Maybe he could train himself to hold that glass steady, no matter what tried to shake it. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't dramatic, but it was the beginning of something powerful: the decision to try. That night, Ethan lay in bed long after the village lights had faded. The air was quiet, but his mind wasn't. The image of the glass, trembling, spilling, slipping through his fingers, haunted him more than he expected. He kept hearing Master Elijah's words echo in his head. "If you let them pull you, your focus will spill, and so will your dreams." Something had shifted. Not dramatically, not like lightning crashing through the sky, but in a quiet, determined kind of way. The way a seed splits underground before anyone sees a thing. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like a victim of his own thoughts. He felt like he had a choice, not a big one, just a small one, to try again, differently. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. No alarms, no rush, just a quiet will to begin. He reached for his phone instinctively, but stopped. He placed it face down on his desk and sat at the edge of his bed, eyes closed, back straight, hands on his knees. He didn't know how to meditate. He didn't know how to silence his thoughts. So he just breathed, in, out, in again. He wasn't trying to become perfect overnight. He wasn't chasing some heroic image of discipline. He just wanted to hold the glass steady, even for a few minutes. It was awkward, clumsy. His legs fidgeted, his brain wandered, but he stayed. That was enough for day one. The days that followed weren't glorious. They weren't the kind of days people make motivational posters about. There were no cinematic triumphs, no big applause. Just Ethan, showing up to his own quiet battle. His mind still wandered. Of course it did. Sometimes within seconds, a thought would creep in. "This is pointless." Another would whisper, "Check your messages." Just once. But every time it drifted, Ethan gently pulled it back. Not with frustration, not with shame, like guiding a wild animal. Not with punishment, but with presence. Slowly, he noticed something. The noise was still there, but it was easier to ignore. Not because the world had gotten quieter, but because he had begun to get stronger. It wasn't about perfection. It was about return, about starting again. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. He still had moments when he gave in, when his phone won, when his mind sprinted off in 100 directions. But the difference was, he came back, and
That's where real discipline begins. Not in never falling, but in choosing again and again to rise.
1 year had passed, a quiet year, a year without applause or recognition, while others chased likes, noise, and approval. Ethan had gone inward. He had failed some days, succeeded on others, but most importantly, he had stayed the course. And then came the announcement. A national challenge, a mental competition designed to push students to their limits. Logic, memory, focus, speed. The best minds from every region would compete. It was the kind of event people talked about for weeks. And when Ethan signed up, the village buzzed. Some supported him, others laughed. The boy who couldn't focus? He won't last 5 minutes. But Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to defend who he used to be, because he wasn't that boy anymore, not even close. The day of the competition arrived, a large hall filled with rows of desks, ticking clocks, and a quiet storm of nerves. Some students tapped their feet, others whispered formulas to themselves. A few sat frozen, overwhelmed before the questions had even started. The moment the timer began, chaos bloomed. Papers flipped, pens scratched. Panic swept the room like wildfire. But Ethan was still. He sat like a stone in the middle of a river. Not because the questions were easy, not because he had all the answers, but because he remembered the garden, the glass, the noise, the choice. One question at a time, one breath at a time. His pen moved calmly. He didn't race the clock. He walked through it. Minutes passed, then hours, then silence. When the scores were posted, gasps filled the room. Ethan's name stood at the top. He had won. The judges congratulated him. Cameras flashed, but Ethan barely noticed the noise, because deep down, he knew something no one else did. The real victory wasn't written in ink. It wasn't printed on a certificate. It wasn't the applause or the gold medal hanging around his neck. The real victory was quiet, steady. It lived inside him now, in the way his thoughts no longer owned him, in the way he had learned not to chase calm, but to become it. From that day forward, everything changed. Not just for Ethan, but for those around him. He was no longer seen as just the bright boy with potential. He had become something far rarer, a young man who had learned to master his own mind. People in the village began to notice the stillness in him, not a silence of weakness, but of strength. He spoke less, but when he did, people listened. His presence had weight. He no longer chased attention. He carried focus like a quiet flame. And slowly, others began coming to him, not to be impressed by his intelligence, but to seek the calm he now lived in. They didn't ask for answers. They asked how to think clearly, how to stay present, how to do what he had done. And Ethan always told them the same thing, that it wasn't magic, that it wasn't some secret formula. It was simply the daily, quiet decision to stay steady, to return again and again to the task in front of you. That discipline isn't about punishing yourself. It's about building something inside you that doesn't shake when the world does. He didn't pretend the distractions were gone. He just no longer bowed to them. The wild horse was still wild, but now he could ride it. So now I turn to you, wherever you are, whoever you are. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to decide. Will you let your mind pull you in every direction, or will you take the reins? Because the difference between living in chaos and living with purpose is not talent. It's not luck. It's not even intelligence. It's discipline. Quiet, unglamorous, powerful discipline. And the truth is, your life will rise or fall to the level of your focus. The world is full of noise. But the ones who learn to silence the noise within, they're the ones who go the furthest.